Great, I think we'll get started. There are still some attendees joining. Thank you, everyone. Great, I see you started using the chat function already. Let us know where you are. We're excited. Today we had registrants from 30 countries and about 70 different companies. So thank you very much for joining us today. This is our third webinar of this year, titled How to Conduct an Effective Supplier Development Program. I'm TARRYN, and as it happens, a few weeks ago, I thought a childhood dream had come true when I went along to a client visit, and I didn't even get to introduce myself. They said, "Oh no, we know you, you're the one who does the webinars." Yeah, I thought I was having my moment like I was a Hollywood star. Alas, that never worked out. I'm a marketing manager, but I am a marketing manager at ENCONA, which is a pretty fun organization. We're a global consulting, auditing, training, and technology firm, particularly in the automotive and aerospace industries, but we do work with plenty of other clients as well. We run these webinars approximately every 6 weeks to 2 months. And we pick the topics based on what might be pertinent in industry at the time, or FAQs that come to us. Hans, Trunkenpolz, probably, if there could be a celebrity of auditors, he might well be on the A list. He probably doesn't need much introducing. To those of you on the call, the founder and chairman of the board of ENCONA. Hans, thank you for joining us today. I believe you're in Germany.
Yes, TARRYN, I am. Yeah, hello everybody out there. And TARRYN, thanks for having me. And I hope I can provide some clarity to this very interesting topic that you have chosen for the crowd out there. So it's good to be here. Thanks.
It's good to have you, and it's good to have you back from holiday. You took 2 weeks off, first time in a long time. I've got plenty of work lined up for you, so don't worry, I'll keep you busy.
I thought so. Thanks.
I'm excited to introduce also our second panelist today, ANDREAS SCHRADER, also based in Germany, and he has over 30 years experience in the automotive industry. And more so, ENCONA has been running a project for 10 consecutive years. And ANDREAS was with that client as the supplier development manager. So can certainly bring some insight as it comes from the client side. Welcome and thanks, ANDREAS.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks, TARRYN, for having me here today.
Awesome. So I think let's kick it off. Hans. Supplier development is an IATF 16949 requirement, but it appears that very few organizations manage to systematically implement such a program. What are the issues out there, and what are some of the current topics or reasons as it pertains to suppliers that make such a program necessary?
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting one, TARRYN, and we got to be very careful because it's usually the clients that say the suppliers caused the troubles, but we will elaborate, I believe, a lot more going down the line when we will speak about the impact on the supply chain when the clients are not providing necessary information and service to the supply chain. But yes, from a customer standpoint of view, what are there? I think it's best to go into this presentation that we've prepared for this with some of them, and I'm sure clients around the world could add more topics to this. But once again, we got to be very careful. It's too easy to finger point what the suppliers are not able to do, what they're not willing to do. You really got to have a close look on this, and this is also why supply development is so extremely powerful if it's done correctly, to understand on both sides that to understand how the negative impact hits the supply chain if the quality of all necessary information into a project with a supplier is not provided by the customers. And there is just as many examples out there that we could roll out then also from the supplier. So it's not a one-way street. We got to be very careful, But I think as we go forward in this webinar, we will also elaborate on that, how important the quality of an input into any supply chain supplier is to drive successful projects and having a safe launch at a later stage. But these would be typical issues that clients would like to address. A poor product quality that's coming into their warehouses, poor delivery performance. Those are those major serial life KPIs, if you want to call it that. Lack of competitive pricing, which is also connected to other topics that we will speak about. Slow transition progress into an industry 4.0, which is very much linked also to the competitive pricing. And what we also hear a lot out there is that suppliers are losing more and more investment power into the future, which is connect also to industry 4.0 transformation, especially from below the tier 1 level, tier 2 and tier 3, and then an ineffective management system performance, which hits the complete automotive industry. So that is also not a very supplier specific topic. Ineffective management systems, according to IATF, we find starting from the OEMs throughout yes, the supply chain. But having a look at this as a slide already tells a story wherever the reasons are for these circumstances and conditions, votes clearly for an effective supplier development program. And coming back to your previous question, Tarryn, why do companies struggle to roll out such an effective program, predominantly on the OEM and tier 1 side? I would say they would say it's cost on the one side, and on the other side, they would say it's too time consuming. And this is what we all need to understand. Supply development is not a quick shot and solve a problem that has popped up somewhere during the product life cycle at a supplier. So you need a deep and long breath to really get the benefits out of supply development. But this is typical what management nowadays says, and I do understand that to a certain extent, is because we find ourselves in very, very difficult times. And just like Andreas, I also find myself in this industry since 30 years, and I must tell you, I haven't seen this industry in a situation in 30 years like we have it today. It's really a challenge. But yet again, and this is why management usually says, what is the cost of doing it? And I think the more correct question today should be, what are the costs of not doing it? And because cost implications are coming down the product life cycle for every customer in any case. So if you spend it as a preventive measure, okay, or as a reaction, that's usually 10 times higher than the preventive approach. And supply development is a preventive approach. We have to be very clear about that. So the question, the way I look at it is, and we should ask ourselves, what are the costs of not doing effective supplier development?
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very good point there. And Andreas, what's your point of view in this? I mean, you were actively managing the supply development program at a global organization.
Yeah, that's correct. So we did a lot of supply development programs together with Hans over several years, 10 years in total. So what Hans just stated is completely correct. So these warranty or severe quality issues, they are the reactive trigger to supply development, but they are coming more from the negative side. So if something happened, then you need to react on that. But Hans just mentioned the prevention. So it is also important to see the supply development as an active task in the strategic supply chain management. Because doing it this way as an active task, this will drive the failure and the cost avoidance much better. On top, it is a positive environment that we are working in then. But you also should not forget that besides the resource topic, it's also a matter of trust between supplier and customer. Because both sides, they have to open their books and they need to listen to each other. And this is not obvious today, or it even hasn't been obvious in the past. So you have to work on the trust. But being said that, you cannot become best in class without your suppliers. So we have to involve them as well.
I think you've just hit on two key words, phrases that I heard loud and clear: an active strategy and a matter of trust.
Yeah.
So I think before we proceed further, just Hans, so that we can define it for everybody on the call, there are so many terminologies out there: supplier quality assurance, supplier quality engineering, supplier development, etc. Is there a clear segregation of which is which, what is what, and where does supplier development specifically fit in?
Yeah, TARRYN, that's really sometimes very confusing. And over and above the three that you just mentioned with supplier quality assurance and supplier quality engineering and supplier development, over and above, there is also different terminologies that the OEM or tier one customers use. So I'm not surprised why this question is coming from your side. But I think there's a couple of, I think generally there is a misperception out there with regards to supply development, because it mingles and mixes with overlaps, if I may call it that, with other activities that a typical supplier quality assurance engineer or auditor does have. So I try to get a little bit of a separation here. So on the left-hand side, that typical SQA activities, if you want to call it that, we do pre-qualification of suppliers for new projects, specification reviews, supplier audits, monitoring is also part of that, inspection and testing, also in the project phase, if you want to call it that. And then, of course, problem solving. So problem occurs, SQAs swarm out and try to fix the problems with the suppliers, if you want to call it that. And then they do also, of course, the verification and the follow-ups of corrective and preventive actions that derive from troubleshooting or problem-solving activities. And that's, and don't get me wrong, that's a hugely important task. So supplier quality assurance is a must. Okay. I just want to elaborate where supply development, supplier quality development goes over and above, and there is certain overlaps. And it starts with one, which to me is the absolute key. And Andreas, you probably vouch for that as well. It's amazing what the building of a sustainable relationship between partners of a customer and a suppliers can achieve. It is absolutely mind-blowing. Mm-hmm. The area, how you can build trust in just being, and Andreas said that earlier, just being honest to your supply chain, all hands on deck, understand that customer side is also not a clean sheet. They're also humans, so humans make mistakes, but the input mistakes into the supply chain have terrible impacts throughout the product life cycle, starting from the project management. But once you build that relationship, which is so crucial, and it will be the future trade, folks out there. Make no mistake. The ones that understand and vouch for building relationships with your valuable partners and suppliers will be the front runners in the future. There's no two opinions about it. Number two, clients are also open to learn from suppliers. And we will elaborate on that, folks. It is a massive advantage if you bring, and we will speak about the team setup as to who should go to the suppliers, to have that feedback to the engineering departments of the client side, to listen to the voice of the supplier, feed it back and process that information to improve for the next following projects. It's a massive advantage. And I think Andreas, we've moved mountains up there with probably 60 suppliers, not only in Europe, but on a global scale, also in US and also in China, in India. And it's completely independent from cultures. Let me tell you that. If you treat the suppliers in a respectful manner, okay, no matter what culture is coming from, you will receive. That became very obvious in 10 years of doing that. But that also requires a mutual win-win situation. So supply development engineers need to communicate that on a permanent manner to the supply chain, that there is a win-win, and we will speak about that. Coaching, workshops, training, so development to make them better, but it's a long-term exchange in experiences, because it's also a cultural exchange between the customer culture and the supplier culture. We need to bring this together, and the exchange of experiences in this regular come-togethers it is also a very, very fruitful activity. And this is what we share, of course, the corrective and preventive action with an SQA. And once again, the SQA top functionality, we need them, guys. If any one of you out there, we need you, like bread needs the butter. We just want to, over and above, complete the other aspects that we just elaborated on the supply development side. So supply development and supply quality assurance, or supply quality engineering, SQEs are most of the times more involved in the project side, SQAs, than more often in serial life. But again, it's handled differently, and that's why there's often a little bit of a misperception. But supply development definitely stands out from the main activities from an SQA, a typical SQA or SQE. And supply development, this is what I found, and I think this is very crucial to understand, also for management and all the decision makers out there. And I hope there is plenty of you in the audience today. It's a long-term operation, cooperative effort between a buying entity and its suppliers to upgrade the suppliers, not only in quality and delivery and costs, but also technologically. Because if you want to ever transform to an Industry 4.0 work environment, we need to understand that the investments are done currently at the OEM levels. They're going all in, all right? Tier 1's already a dramatic slowdown. But now you can imagine what's happening from tier 2, tier 3 level. So if we want to have competitive prices also in the future, we need to support and help them also to, in this transition to an Industry 4.0 or a digital or technology world, for which many of those suppliers don't have investment power. Okay. So and of course, the ongoing improvements in that relationship, not only in the KPIs, in that relationship, is bringing you the benefits that we can demonstrate by data out of 10 consecutive years, as TARRYN already elaborated, with real data, what it is, and the cost efficiency. Supply development down the line should not cost you any money. That's the core message. So looking at it, what is the money that we have to invest to do that? But what is the return? And all those data are in. So we are talking hard facts here. And I think we are one of the few ones that can really provide practical experiences from such an extensive program over really 10 consecutive years, over 60 suppliers around the world. And that's why it's very valuable. And thank you again, Andreas, for joining in to also give us a reflection from the customer side back then where you were responsible. So this is the definition in segregation, TARRYN, if you ask me.
Perfect, thank you. I think this slide in particular, you've summarized it for me, if that counts, very well. I think the next point to cover, it is about people also. So how do you implement a supplier development program, and which people, individuals or roles should be included in such a program?
Yeah, and let me start to repeat what Andreas just said a couple of minutes ago. If we don't get the buy-in from executive members of the client organization, then don't bother to proceed. Just save the money. That is crucial. So if you don't get the execs on board to drive and champion these programs, then it's a waste of time, because it will become subject of a cost-cutting activity long time before you harvest any benefits from supply development. So we need a deep and a long breath for that. Consequently, without the top dogs coming to the party, all right, it will be a waste of time. Don't even consider. And this was very good in this company that we are referring to then, because we had the executives on board, not only for committing to it and signing it off, also personally, and that makes a difference. Okay, so coming back from the customer side, this is how we operated, and the only way to suggest, and I can also tell you why. So we need from the customer side supply development champion, maybe a CEO or a COO, some sort of executive member, usually purchasing or supply chain. Okay, simply because these guys, these top managers, are responsible for the suppliers and the supply chain. So preferably some executive in purchasing or supply chain. Sometimes it's combined with logistics, but that's a necessity. All right. Without that, that's a showstopper right away. Don't even proceed. We need the responsible buyers for the suppliers that you want to develop, the quality engineer that can be an SQA as well, and this is where we have the overlap, but there is some benefits I will elaborate on later. Then hugely important, depending on if you have design authority, you do product design, bring the design engineer. Design engineers, guys, are typically completely disconnected from the supply chain.
Very often, yeah.
And they're so far away. They're brilliant guys that they're just not connected with the manufacturing process and technology. And if you look into the basic responsibility of a design engineer, it must actually provide a product design that is made for manufacturability under process capable conditions. That's his job. Not just to provide a CAD file or a drawing and throw it over the wall and say, build me a process around it. And consequently, the design engineers in projects, for new projects, need to be merging a lot strong and a lot more with the technology where the products are produced or assembled, whatever the case may be. So, and that was a wonderful, wonderful experience, because they more and more opened their minds and could see how product designs affects now the manufacturing process at the suppliers by having unrealistic tolerances and what so forth. And you must understand, just in case you think now, well, but they go through a feasibility study and they sign it off. But I can tell you, Andreas, correct me if I'm wrong, but and they said to us, the majority of them said yes, but we also fear if we don't sign the feasibility off, the project goes to one of our competitors. So that's also a very, very fruitful information fed back from the supply chain that needs to be considered at the customer side. So why? So we have to break down those fear levels so that they can pull the plug and say, this is not possible. Okay. So design engineer, hugely important, sends your engineers through a massive learning curve. If you're not responsible for product design, okay, bring somebody from engineering. Mm-hmm. All right. They need to understand what's actually happening in the supply chain and in their technology and in their processes. And then, of course, the supply development auditors and trainers. It doesn't have to be individual, can be a team of internal, external, combination of, whatever the case may be. So this is a supply development team, should be a supply development team from the customer side that executes this program towards the supply chain. And from the supplier side, as Andreas rightfully and correctly said earlier, you also need that champion to drive it from the supplier side. So there's got to be a mutual commitment between customer and supplier, which is difficult enough anyway, because in all honesty, when you talk to suppliers and you talk about their customers, that's also not always happy days for a variety of very valid reasons. So we need to bring people together. Okay, we will suck up all our egos and all our business cases, because business case is fed through that relation going forward, which is the future core in any case. So we need that supply development champion and a managing director or a plant manager, executive, the top dogs. The quality engineers at the supplier, needless to mention, also logistics. Logistics is becoming more and more a complex environment to operate in. And it brings customer and supplier together. There's lots of customer communication in the logistics area, as you well know. Production interface we need, of course, and project management or engineering from the supply side as well. So there's quite a fair amount of faculties or functions, I should say, that should be ideally involved in supply development to really get all the benefits out of it, because over and above, it is about bringing people together, exchange, help one another to understand where you're coming from, where I'm coming from, and work together as a team to get to this mutual benefit for both organizations. So that's a team setup, TARRYN, that I would like to suggest if anybody's interested to roll such a program out.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and thanks for sharing both the customer and supplier side. I can see why companies might struggle to implement it, though. It is pretty resource intensive, and we all know resources are limited. But I mean, how should they go about implementing such a program together with their suppliers? I assume it's a long-term approach. So what steps should they take?
Yeah, long-term approach. Just to give our our audience out there a little bit of an indication. Supplier development should not exceed a certain amount of time, because over time, and we had that before, Andreas, you remember, a loss of focus.
Yeah.
If it's taking too long. So realistically, a realistic lead time from all the experiences we've made would be around 6 months to maximum 8 months at the very max. But six months is something that we should aim for. Just to get this clarification on the lead time. But coming back to the question of yours, it's basically a 5-phase approach, which includes, of course, very, very important, the purchasing and procurement departments of the supplier side. And we like to call it this the concept phase. Okay? And you need to identify certain criteria that you want to apply in order to select the suppliers you want to involve in supply development. You very unlikely want to develop each and every supplier in your database. So you need very, very precise criteria as to what criteria you want to use in order to select. So that's hugely important. That could be, of course, quality, cost, and delivery. That could be technology related, strategic related, single multi-sourcing. Guys, this is a very, very hot topic right now.
Yeah. And
I didn't tell, I used to be an OEM back in the days for many, many years where single sourcing was just not on because of the risk of supply. And I do understand, but OEMs are going in too many cases more and more away from that as well, in too many cases. And I understand why this is done. If you have 10,000 units for 2 suppliers, you have 5,000 units for every supplier. If you have 1 supplier, you give him 10,000 and you get a better price. I understand that maths, right? Just like everybody does. But it does increase the risk, of course. And I think we've seen this very, very sadly with wire harnesses coming out of the Ukraine that is currently involved in a very tragic and it impacted so many OEM plants all the way to shutting plants down. So you need to be very clear about the criteria that should be used, and then the supplier should be nominated with an official nomination letter. And of course, there's talks between the supplier and the customer before, should come from an official supply development nomination letter from the purchasing executive or whoever is the champion, for that to give it this formal touch that there's something special we want to do with you and together, right? Then the concept must be developed, and the top management buy-in must be gathered both from customer side and from supplier side. That's why there's already discussions and talks and pre-talks before that, before the official nomination letter should be provided. So if the top dogs don't come to the party, once again, guys, don't waste your time. It's not gonna fly. So that is crucial. So we need to provide them some information of cost reduction potentials. And once again, the question today is not what does it cost me to do that? What are the costs of not doing it? It's more appropriate. It definitely, if you try to launch a program like this. So once this concepting is done and the nomination is done and the acknowledgement is done, you kick this off. What we've done, Andreas, remember, the top executive purchasing director personally came to this kickoff meeting to get the concept one more time, what we want to achieve together. Yeah, to present the experts or the supply development engineers or auditors, if you want to call it that, and to again reinforce the acknowledgement which has been done already before that. So that's a real official kickoff meetings with the executives from both sides. And that is hugely important because it gives this program a complete new set of wings, if you want to call it that. That's the formal kickoff. And then in phase number 3, what we do is we have several different deep dive sessions. SD01 is related to project management and product or process development. Basically in the product life cycle that focuses on project management until safe launch. So RFQ, if you want to call it that, request or quotation comes in all the way to hand over to serial condition, usually SOP plus 90 days. All right. Hugely important because this is where quality is determined. So anything that goes wrong in your product and process development or the project management serial life will not be able to recover in full. Period. Will not be able. So we have a very strong focus on the project. And the reason why, folks, why this is so important, I'm going to show you this later, is because in that phase, we also very, very stringent in getting the understanding of where is the input quality from the customer lacking? What are the impacts in my feasibility study? What are the impacts in my quotation? What are the impacts in my process or product development or in my complete program management? And I think everybody understands out there, the supplier is dependent. And for all of you that has been done an MLA or maturity level assurance with customer projects, clearly shows you the importance of the input quality, maybe information completeness, maybe information in time, maybe decisions. So everything affects your project management. So the input quality must be considered, and you must really sink your teeth in and open your hearts and your minds to say and admit that we are also humans and make mistakes. And now we can see together with the supplier what the actual impact is, which is a very, very, very beautiful learning curve. In a negative way, because it usually comes with problems, but it's a very healthy way to learn. Because humans don't usually have a natural motivation to change anything until it's a little bit painful and hurtful. So this is very important here. The deep dive number 2, so 2 to 3 days, depending on the complexity of the products, complexity of the processes, company size, 2 to 3 days. The bigger the suppliers are, usually those programs are triggered by OEMs and by tier 1, big tier 1 companies into tier 2 and tier 3. So usually the suppliers that you're working with are coming from tier 2 and tier 3. And of course, but the same application is for a tier 1 if you want to roll it out from an OEM side. But the bigger the organizations get, could add some more man days, if you want to call it that, to get this deep dive, the gap analysis. And then the second one is for the serial production performance. I'm going to show you also what goes in there. And then optionally, we also have supply development 03 for production system excellence, manufacturing excellence. So not just the systems, fully blown manufacturing excellence where technology goes in, digitalization and high force zero transformation. But this is optional. You can start easily with SD1 and 2 and make it a benefit if they pass the program, and I will talk about that. If they qualify for an SD3, because that's when you really grow together. And then the work packages will get designed from all these finding reports. Just to give you a brief idea, out of these deep dive SD1 and 2, you usually collect somewhere between 60 and 100 non-conformities. So that's a brutal munition to get together and cluster your work packages, because that will be now the input when you come together and do training and do coaching and do things together to overcome those obstacles. So if you're used to those typical process audit results with two findings and 3 findings, that's flesh to bone. That's really getting everything surfaced that we need for the work packages to get a structured, systemic approach to perform and improve our processes in that relation between customers. Then the implementation, as I just elaborate, that can be trainings, that can be coachings, that can be all sorts of activities based on the work packages that came out of the deep dive gap analysis, if you want to call it that. And what's also interesting, in those 6 to maximum 8 months, you permanently monitor the supplier indicators of PPMs, of on-time delivery, of whatever KPIs you agree in their concept and you commit to amongst the top management on both sides, just to see where this is going over a period of several months. And phase number 5, the closure, is what we do, what we've done, Andreas, those final trend review meetings.
Mm-hmm.
That's the official closing event between client and supplier, where we also announce that they officially passed. There's also pass and fail criteria, so it's not a one-sided investment. So both need to come to the party and grow together. We did a supplier award for supply development, and it was also, and where's the win-win for the suppliers? Because what we were aiming for is, one is to switch them to a level 1 PPAP supplier, which is not so much the reduction of paperwork, because the paperwork still needs to be done, but you just submit the PSW. But it's very important for them to be seen as a level 1 supplier, because they're proud, because it's a level of trust. And trust is what we are lacking. We don't trust our suppliers. The problem. And that, Andreas, was an extremely nice experience we made. How proud they are after so many months of working together to become a level 1 supplier.
Yeah.
Although they still needed to do and produce all the documents, but it made them proud. But what's the more choose is into the future business wins, and that's something we really worked on. So suppliers that passed that supply development program successfully and showed the performance over time, that was linked also to purchasing volume. And that has a variety of advantages, because for the supplier, they can do a better investment planning, personal planning, if they have a bigger volume coming forward in that relationship. And you must understand one thing: the OEMs didn't understand. I don't think they did grasp that situation in full. Back in the days when I was an OEM, we had volumes. We had volumes of components. And there's one thing for certain, and every person involved in this industry will know that. When you're a supplier to the automotive industry, you need volume, because the part price per se is, how do you say it, politically correct? Debatable. Let's put it that way. So what happened is after the OEMs switched all to these platform strategies, that was the time and the era when every day when I went out of the streets, there was a new model driving by that I didn't know, which was never the case. Every new car we knew back in the day. But with these platform strategies, it helped the OEMs to be more attractive on the existing markets by launching different models. But consequently, there's many suppliers there are above the platform and not in the platform. So it reduced the quantity and volume. So now they have this price pressure and they don't have the volume anymore, which made it very, very, very difficult for them to make enough money and sustain and maintain investment power for the future. Okay. So that is a huge, definitely a huge advantage that we saw in working together, that relationship, that trust level, that performance that needs to be proved, of course. What they gained is better planning quality because businesses, let's put it that way. And I would like to, that's also that question from TARRYN. So this is the program per se. We called it, Andreas, we called it track 1. Track 1 is that deep dive for 2 to 3 days, whatever the criteria I've given you before, where you tackle project management. And then you have those ongoing monthly follow-up reviews. That can be follow-ups of the findings, that can be doing feasibility projects together when project is already in the pipeline, trainings and workshops again. So very, very effective. And the track 2 was then the management system and the process area, serial life. Also 2 to 3 days, depending. And then ongoing those improvement workshops and trainings. And after, let's say, six months, maximum 8 months maybe, we started this final trend review meetings where we officially decided whether the program was successfully passed or not passed. Okay, because I think the consequence definition of must also be predetermined in this notification letter. What if we invest here as a client for 6 to 8 months in a supplier and nothing is moving? So we have also the option of not being passed, and that should consequently also be linked to certain consequences. But let's focus on the successfully passed, and I did elaborate on that. That comes out of this final trend review meeting with the awards. And then you still do your ongoing monitoring. So you don't lose track of them. That continues. And but what is so great on this program is just the relation and the trust level you build, not only because there is one faculty on each side involved, but there is a multidisciplinary approach from both sides to learn from one another. But we need to open our minds to admit that we all make mistakes. There's no judge and blame. We want to go somewhere on that mutual win-win situation. And the track 3, as I said, is related to manufacturing excellence, transition to digital automation, Industry 4.0 in general. That can be done independent from track 1 and track 2. You can also stop after track 1 and track 2 if supplier not ready yet and restart. That's very optional. So you can put that together in a very modular approach. And that approach is, and here you can see also the topics. It's also another benefit that you can do is because you're also required to do process audits at your supplier, okay, which is also an IATF requirement. So there, what we've done is to combine in the track 1 in the project management, and we related it to the P2, P3, and P4 version, which is representing the project management, but together with the customer input quality. What's the quality of the specification, the communication, the code of conduct, the project support we get from our clients, or is it a one-way street, or is it a dialogue, ECR dynamics? That's another kettle of fish. I don't know if this is clear to all the customers, what the impact is on this massive amount of engineering changes during a running project.
Yes.
It's just completely insane. Andreas, what's your 2 cents on that?
Yeah, I fully agree on that, Hans. So the engineering changes, they have a massive impact to the organization, because in worst case, you have to go back and do feasibility things again and again. So there's a lot of work behind that. And what I also can add is that the customer input for quality is also what I want to add, that when we do this track 1 and track 2 deep dive audits, we also look into the direction of the customer. As you mentioned, we have findings between 16 and 100. That is correct, but there are quite some findings that we have in the direction of the customer as well, when it comes to drawings, to feasibility analysis, to information about products, things like this. So it's not only the supplier.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with that. That's a good point. But
that helped us. Sorry, the last sentence.
Sure.
But that helped us really to gain the trust and to make the supplier understandable that it's not a one-way development. So it's not just in the way of to the supplier. We also are open to listen and to improve things.
Yeah, and the customer guys from product design or engineering department, that to me, Andreas, was the ultimate learning curve, because in too many cases, the design engineers or the remote process engineering guys or project managers are just disconnected from the operations, and their task is to provide a manufacturable product or model.
Yeah. How can they make robust products without that?
No. That's so it was really one of the core experiences, to bring engineering and technology together to supply. So that is very advisable to integrate that. But guys, I want to warn you, we need some psychologists here, because it's not the easiest process for a customer to admit that we made mistakes, which is human. There's no problem with that. But to admit that needs a certain personality, and an open-minded approach. Let's put it that way. And because there's humans on both sides, and every person you meet in your life is fighting battles you know nothing about. So we got to be nice, and we got to be open to one another, because we are all in the same critical, difficult times. But just to down pressure it on one side is not going to change anything. And if that, and we've seen that, folks, if you just pressure the supply chain, and I tell this to the OEMs all the time, you will be paying back millions and millions and millions to the supply chain in any case, which is happening already anyway, because they run out of steam and then they have to reinforce them to get parts. So it's going to come back in any case. So we need to balance this really in the middle, and help this industry to get some humanity back, because this went completely lost over decades. I can tell you that much. Very, very powerful. And then you have your VDA 6.3 or IATF. You can also report this to have evidence for what you have to do in any case. So that's the synergies we can use. And then you can see also in serial life in track 2, it covers, there's not even all modules in here, guys. It's not even complete yet. But just to get an idea of what are the covering points that we get out from these tracks or deep dive audits, and then go into the work package. Yeah, TARRYN, back to you. This should hopefully answer the question of how exactly is it done, and what are the steps that we advise to consider, at least when doing supply.
It's a lot of detail for sure. I had no idea there would be quite so much coming up in these two tracks. Andreas, is there anything you would want to add to this?
Well, that's hard to add something. This is a really comprehensive list that Hans just showed. The only thing that I can emphasize again is that the executive management involvement on both sides is really important, because from my experience, we rarely had problems on the working level during supply development projects. That was really a good progress that we did and good working together. But the top management, the executives, they really struggled to keep the priority for these big projects up and running. And this is why I think it's important to have a clear time frame that we're talking about. I mean, this development, it will never end because it's a development, but it is the process that we trigger, that we start in the 6 to 8 months. That's what we did, and then the supplier has to work on this for sure. So yeah, being said that, you need to have regular supply development performance reviews by the top management on both sides, supplier and customer. And the customer, as we spoke in the beginning, we also need to put this as a strategic target, and it should be reviewed during the management review regularly. Okay.
You know, interesting is I see a recurring theme actually across a number of the webinars we've done together, Hans, and it's the top management responsibility in particular and involvement to keep these things going. For example, the process ownership webinar that we conducted, Hans, just kind of side note, the essentialness of top management buy-in.
No, absolutely, yeah.
Guys, I think we are ready to wrap it up, but before we wrap it up, Andreas, I've got the final question of the day for you, and also you've got the data that everybody is hoping to see, I'm sure. I'd like to understand what are the actual benefits of a supplier development program, such as this one that you ran for many years, and why would companies roll out such a time-consuming and expensive program?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think, TARRYN, the best is if we go to this slide that you're showing right now. So this shows the data of 3 years. These are real data. And you can see over this period of 3 years, we decreased the number of red or unsatisfactory suppliers from 14 down to 3%. That was really a huge success. And in parallel, the number of green suppliers increased by 24%. But what does that mean? So more green suppliers, so more good suppliers, we ended up with less quality issues. We had less logistic issues, and also less customer issues. But also those green suppliers, they became more and more the long-term partners. So we started to introduce long-term contracts also with the suppliers, what was a really good benefit for us and helped us to come along with this. But also those green suppliers, they became more and more partners in terms of engineering and best practice suppliers. So we learned a lot from them, and they were open to share this information with us. But important is that besides all these supplier development activities, it was not only that made big improvement possible. We also had in our internal organization a change, because when they realized that supply development is making improvements, and so we really had all the other plans, the engineering guys, the purchase, that besides the projects, the supply development projects that we're running, they came and asked us questions. They asked for support. They asked us to give input on some supply development related topics. So we had a change in our entire organization after that moment when they realized, oh, supply development is not that bad. So it helps us to get better. So the communication between our organization and suppliers increased a lot in a positive way. We had good discussion and feasibility analysis on quality issues and so on. And what Hans said, one of the key was really to make clear that everything we do is we do without judge and blame. So that was really important. And also the suppliers, they started to understand what does it mean to take responsibility during such a project. So they started to ask good questions during feasibility analysis instead of saying there is no problem at all because I want to get the business home. So that was really helpful. And finally, we really had an amount of suppliers that then became part also of our internal projects when it comes to zero defect workshops. So we invited them to do with us together zero defect workshops. We had design improvements team where the supplier was really a part of it, and we came up with a lot of good ideas. So there is a lot of benefits in the supply development, definitely. But again, don't forget, it's not it should not be triggered just from the reactive way. It also should an active supply development, strategic. Okay.
Absolutely, and that's what you brought up at the very beginning. That is exceptionally impressive data from such a long project. That it's awesome to see, and thank you for sharing, guys. So that's it for the end of our presentation for today, but we've got a few questions. Please allow me to just catch up there quickly. And load shedding just happened in South Africa, so the room's gone dark here. Right, got them here. A question from Surah. Based on your experience, which supplier KPI should we assign? And I took note that this was asked at the time when you were speaking about deep dive audits.
The existing typical one out of serial life with your PPMs and your on-time delivery, there is nothing wrong with that. What I would over and above put in more from a client side is more related to projects. You need to understand, as a supplier, there is no better way to disappoint your clients than being not on top of the game during project work already. And the customers do assess the supplier not only on soft factors in project management like responsiveness and engineering support, but also some hard facts. And what I would suggest, what we used very successfully is a PPAP submission on time or submission level for customer milestones. Could be a very useful one. That would represent your timing, and the quality is very important. Is your FTT rate, your first time through. You submit a PPAP, and you expect that to be approved by the customer first time through, all right? In reality, and I just came back from a company and they run the figures for me, we've implemented that. They have for every project 3.2, statistically 3.2 PPAPs for every project. That's a very useful KPI that I would like to suggest you. The problem is it's a little bit difficult because most of the companies don't have a process cost calculation. They don't even know what it costs them if a PPAP is rejected by a customer and it goes through another PPAP trial and another inspection, it goes in the laboratory. So there's a lot of efforts that go in. And if you use 3 PPAP loops to get one project in green, that's a very useful KPI that you can consider. And we usually call it FTT, first time through, which represents the quality of a PPAP. In serial life, leave as it is PPM, they require that on-time delivery.
Okay, thank you. Question from Maxime. I feel like this one starts talking towards emotional intelligence too, which we've always discussed. agreed on openness about being wrong. Not sure how this works for Asian suppliers where saving face is quite an important way of life. Do you care to elaborate, please? I think all businesses need a cultural officer that understands different working cultures and adapts the communication to these different cultures.
Yeah, the different approach. Yeah, look, different approach. But one life has taught me well. And you don't need to speak any language. If you respect the person, respect's coming back. And that's not always the spoken word you use. That's your body tension, that's your energy, that's your open-minded approach, which creates energy, which everybody senses in any case. And on that mutual, respectful level, Andreas, I don't think anywhere we went, we ever had really issues in that. But potentially, I would agree with the person that raised the question. Could be slightly different, but respect wins in every culture. That's what I learned. Period.
Absolutely agreed.
Yeah.
I've got a second question here from Maxime, who actually put that one forward. Andreas, you might not have the numbers to hand. Perhaps we could send an analysis of this afterwards, but very interesting point. Interesting chart, 3 years of real data. Wondering if there are any details about the length of collaboration with the suppliers, the long-term suppliers improved in time, or the new suppliers more fit for the job, as well as the age of the suppliers, if they are established suppliers and new players. Did you note any pattern?
Well, what I can say that the majority of the suppliers that we had in the supply development were already known suppliers and suppliers that have been working with us for many years. There were also some new suppliers, especially in the best cost countries, but the majority were definitely the old suppliers. So,
okay.
The age of the suppliers, we were very, how can I say, in my company, we were very long-term connected to our suppliers, which was not always good, but in this case, so we also made it possible to improve and to make changes with suppliers that were delivering for more than 10 years already to us. So, okay.
I think that answers that perfectly. And next question from Merv. Do you have any approach on how to choose which suppliers to develop? For example, new or old suppliers, or any other approach?
Andy, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
Well, yeah, as I said in the beginning, there was a supplier strategy that we had. Based on that one, we selected suppliers. So we were looking for suppliers where it would make sense to have long-term contracts. Of course, the performance was an indicator as well. How is a supplier performing over the last month and years in terms of quality, logistics, and so on. As well, we were looking for some suppliers that we took into the supply development program, where we said we think they have the ability to become a development supplier for us, so they can take more responsibilities in the development phase than just building something to print.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hans, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that one?
No, perfectly fine. Thanks, Chair.
Perfect. I've got a question here from Douglas. What is the driver or mechanism for best practice suppliers? For example, complaints, failures, PPM, etc. Our company uses negative complaints and failures. Do you know, or could you recommend one that is better?
Yeah, well, of course, you need to take a serious look into this negative examples as well, how the supplier is dealing with that. But when we did these track 1 and track 2 audits, we also had a very deep look into the organization and into the processes at our suppliers. And we often found things where we said, wow, this is way better than we do. So let's make this as a best practice also for us. And then we did a small workshop with the suppliers and figured that out, how to do that. And yeah, so that what I want to say is that also from these deep dive audits, track 1 and track 2, you can gather positive and best practices.
Absolutely. So from Madhav, who should bear the cost of supplier development? This is a good one. Should it be 100% by the customer?
This project that Andreas and myself are referring to was covered by the customer.
Yeah.
Yes. And but there is definitely in that track 3 that I elaborated on, where you really come into savings. Andreas, I think the idea was back then to use part of the savings to take portions of the cost as well in the track 3 when it comes to manufacturing excellence, because the customers usually provide a lot of IP, intellectual property, into the supply chain as well, which generates savings. So the idea was to get portions of that saving and reinvest in supply development to have it, because it's a mutual win-win. So at the beginning, track 1 and track 2, the client took 100% of the costs. Going forward into track 3, when it comes to manufacturing excellence, transition, industry 4.0, there was a split concept. Not necessarily 50-50, but at least a portion of it to demonstrate and commit that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and as our suppliers were not only delivering for us, we said that all the benefits that you have with your other clients, you have them 100%. So that was one of our arguments to say we want to have at least a portion of that one.
Yeah, well, I think that would make sense, yes, because it would benefit the entire business at the end of the day, at that point in time. Thank you very much, Hans and Andreas. That's the end of the questions for today. Just to wrap up for everybody on the call, I will be sharing the recording with you by Friday, as well as a copy of the slides. Or otherwise you could also download the recording on our podcast. I'll share those details with you later this week. If you have any questions at all about today's presentation or any offerings that ENCONA can bring to you, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Hans, Andreas, thank you again for giving up your valuable time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. All the best out there.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.